Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be going over with winning in mind, building your subconscious circle. If you guys remember last time, we wrapped up talking about the conscious circle, and again, that encompasses the broader umbrella that falls under is your three minds, basically. That would be a better way to describe it, the three minds versus the three selves. So conscious, subconscious, and your self image. And Laney's whole theory or spectrum involves keeping all of those in balance with each other. So we just finished up conscious mind. We're going to talk about the subconscious circle today. It's going to be a relatively short slideshow today because a lot of these things are not very like he's not Lanny's not saying here anything here that's revolutionary, really. This is kind of like common sense type of stuff, but he presents it the way that he presented it in this book, and the kind of the structure and how to go about balancing these three circles is kind of what attracted me to reread this book and go over it. Things about like the direct affirmation, goal setting, etc. The subconscious circle. This is going to be a lot of kind of common sense things. And as always, Lanny talks about these topics in a way that's tailored to athletics. So you kind of have to get creative if you're going to start implementing these things in like a daily life or work or whatever it is. So let's just kick things off here. And let me go to that section in the book. So, 7 guidelines to building your subconscious skill. Number 1, catch yourself doing something right. So what does Laney mean by this? This means that, well, as you can see by the second bullet point, if all you do is write down your failures and you're studying your failures, you'll only ever get failure. You don't remember that story that Laney told. I think we talked about it like the first or second episode, about how the little league coach told him, hey, don't strike out. Well, now all you're thinking about is striking out. Instead, he should have said, hey, just get a hit. Just get a hit. And that way you're actually thinking about the action that you want to happen, right? So catch yourself doing something right. Be your best promoter, right? Toot your own horn a little bit. Don't get cocky or overzealous with it, but you have to. It's all about the self-image. You got to promote yourself. The behaviors that you want, promote those. Look at all the positives, just so you have a greater chance of repeating that same successful attempt at whatever it is you're doing. Number 2, train 4 or 5 days a week. To me, this says everything about consistency in your training regimen. If you're building the subconscious skill, right? So what's the subconscious skill or your subconscious circle? This is what you're going to tap into come competition day. Because remember, come competition day, when you're performing the actions, running, hitting a golf ball, kicking, catching, passing, etc., you don't want to be consciously thinking about those actions. You want them so hardwired in your brain that it just comes naturally to you. What did Laney say? Champions work hard in competition. Champions work hard in practice. They work easy in competition. If you ever watch, like I was watching last week, Players Championship on the PGA. These guys, their swing is effortless and the ball goes some odd yards. Well, it should be effortless because they've been practicing for so long, so much in their lifespan, and then in the days, weeks leading up to the competition. So you got to get the consistency. That's only going to come from training 4 or 5 days a week, because now that gives you time. You train any less than that, it's hard to, if you have bad errors, it's hard to correct those, because now you're having to wait longer in between training periods and you're just extending it. Laney says no. Be consistent. Train 4 or 5 days a week. Next point, wherever you are, be all there. Focus. I was just listening to a podcast, Lex Friedman podcast with Cal Newport. This was like a couple weeks ago. And then I found out Cal Newport has his own podcast, like most people do these days. Cal Newport wrote a book called Deep Work, which I have heard about. I've never read myself, but he kind of talks a little bit about it in his interview with Lex Friedman, about these long spans of where you're kind of hyper-focused on one thing, and you get a lot more done via this technique. And if you, and it doesn't even have to, he says he does like an hour and a half, but if you're on a roll, keep going. And we're going to see that in the next point here. So wherever you are, be all there. If you're on the practice field, be all there. Don't let your conscious mind wander and think about other things. You're there to work. Now, the opposite point of that, when you get off the practice field or you're done with the competition, don't bring that home with you. Now you're home. Tend to what's at home. Family, kids, spouse, parents, etc. Leave, if you have a bad performance, leave it on the field. Don't bring it home with you. Next, rehearse the match day often within your training session. So this is to get your mind prepared, probably your conscious mind prepared for what's to be expected on match day. So you kind of lessen your nerves on the day of the match. You know what to expect on the day of the match, so there's no surprises. Because any surprises, then your conscious mind takes over. It's focused on that surprise, like, oh my gosh, they completely changed the distance, or oh my gosh, if I'm a salesman, oh my God, the manager at one of my stores changed the time. Completely changed the time that we're supposed to meet. Things like that. So it's in your head that things like this can happen. So when it does happen, well, hey, you have a plan B for it. So rehearse the match day often within your training session. Next, this is what I alluded to earlier. When you're playing well, play a lot. When you have that momentum going, keep it going. There's a great book on this called The Compound Effect that I read years ago. I think it's by Darren Hardy. And how the little things are tough to do in the beginning, but then they snowball into something that's a lot bigger later on, and it's harder to stop. And that it's kind of like a train, takes a little bit to get going, but then once it gets going, it's going, and it's tough to stop a moving train. So when you're playing well, just keep that momentum going. If he gives an example in the book, if you're crushing drives, keep crushing drives. Not only is this going to help to solidify that skill, but it's also going to imprint in your mind, hey, it's like me to crush these drives 300 some odd yards right in the middle of the fairway. Next point, we raise ourselves to the standard we are around. So Laney says here that we should play with people or train with people that are better than us. Right? Because think about how much more you're going to learn from somebody who's better than you. You learn more in your losses than you do your wins, right? And that's just common sense. Think about how when you win, it's celebrations. You're not, I mean, you are still doing, reflection on the competition, but it's a lot harder because you just won. No, when you lose, that's when you try to learn the most because you're hungry to get back on the field, court, or whatever, and win the next time. So play with people who are better than you. It's going to elevate you, and you're going to learn from them. And any tips and tricks that they have that they use to get a leg up on the competition. And it's going to raise, like we said earlier, it's going to raise your self-image. It's like me to play with guys or girls of this caliber. And the last point, plan your year. So Lanny, in this point, talks a lot about, in his specific sport, how he planned his year. So he broke it up into quarters. First quarter was getting your training. Let me go to it. I think it was getting your training schedule set, and then getting your equipment set, setting up your competitions. Then the second phase, your conditioning, or excuse me, the second quarter. Then third quarter is all competitions. Fourth quarter, you're resting and reflecting. But you could easily tailor this for whatever you need in your work life. For example, plan your year. If you know the certain projects that are happening for that fiscal year, if you have access to that, well, you can plan around that. Okay, I need to get ready for this project coming up in the first quarter. I have to be familiar with this skill set. And then second quarter, we'll have a little bit of a break. But then third quarter, we're going to turn it back up again because we got this on the books, et cetera, et cetera. So I think planning is crucial. I will be honest with you. I haven't planned 2021 necessarily. I've been planning the weeks out. I've been planning every week, like, what do I want to get done this week? And then I have a daily board where I try to plan out my day. I'm not 100%, it doesn't happen every single day. There's some days where I don't utilize the board, but it's getting better. And I do feel a difference when I have the plan on the board and the plan for the week, and I'm able to look, okay, what should I be doing right now? I could be doing something right now. Helps keep me organized. Next, performance analysis. So in here, Lanny's talking about, in your practice sessions, to keep track of your progress. Right, the first bullet point here, record your progress. You cannot manage what you do not measure. And this was a quote by Peter Drucker. Whatever gets measured gets managed. So you're not going to really know how well you're doing unless you keep track of it. So he advocates to get a performance journal and to detail your sessions in that performance journal. And the journal is going to do kind of two things. As you can maybe see from that bullet point, a journal is going to allow you to see what you were doing in the session, how it went, the targets hit, birdies made, etc. And you're not going to necessarily write your failures in there. You don't want to do that. But you're going to see, from the adjustments you made in practice sessions, the results of it, and then you can kind of tailor what you're going to be doing in the competition and the real thing. So that's number one. And then number two is a journal is going to be used to build your self-image. This is where, I'll be honest, I have a journal. Well, it's kind of like a diary. We're going to talk about that in a second. More like a diary, although I'd like it to be more like a journal. But I write down direct affirmations in there, like, hey, it is like me to be this. it is like me to do this. So your journal can be used to build that self-image. Next point, it's one thing to talk about the journal, but to be honest with you, and Laney talks about this, so few people do. So few people keep a performance journal. He gives a couple reasons here. They keep a diary and not a journal. So what's a diary? So Laney's definition of a diary is something that you record impressions, good or bad, of what happened that day. Right? So you're not really recording. It's kind of like the documentary of your day. And at least for me too, you're recording things in there that maybe don't even have anything to do with your certain line of work, sport, etc. It's just a overall rundown of the day. And for performance, it should just be your specific sport, right? It shouldn't be anything else that is happening in the day, relationships, parents, kids, friends, what you saw in the news. No, keep this too specific to your sport. Number two, a lot of people do not know how to keep a performance journal, right? They talk about a lot of things they did bad. Well, again, studying failure will only get you good at failure. You want to write down in there your successes, the results, certain tweaks that you did in this training session, and we're going to talk about this in a second here. And the last point, most people are lazy. Think about it. You're in practice for a few hours, 4 or 5 days a week. After a training session, you probably just want to go home, unwind, eat, rest. It's hard mentally. It can be hard to sit down with all the distractions in this world that we have today and write something down. And you have to write it down. I mean, you don't have to, but I find I'm more committed. Things get more, I guess I should say, more things get done when I write it down. More things get like inscribed in my memory when I write it down. Physically write it down versus typing it out or, just trying to remember it, right? Something about that hand to paper, like, commits it to memory. Because it's tough. It's tough to do sometimes. So what are the elements of a performance journal? Well, number one, there is a competition log element. This is where you would record your competition dates and the results of your competition. Second, we have the equipment log, is all the equipment that you're using. Third, we have the general data section. So this is date, time, location, what you learned, what you accomplished in that competition or in that training session, etc. Next, solution analysis. Solutions to challenges you discovered in the training day. So it's one thing to just go around and just picking apart, like, hey, you did this wrong, this wrong. And you should refrain from recording those thoughts, feelings, etc. But it's another thing to offer a solution for that. I always hate, like, people just in real life, they'll point out bad things, but they will never point out, like, hey, how can we fix this then? Okay, I get it. It's messed up. What should I do? What should we do about it? So there's a section, Laney advocates for a specific section in the performance journal where you're providing solutions to these challenges. Next, success analysis. Again, be your own best promoter, anything you did well, anything you were happy about, build up that self-image. Write down those successes. They could be anything. They're little things. I write down little things in my journal, diary, whatever you want to call it. I write down little successes in there. Because again, it's like me to, at the base level, solve things, get better at things, etc. It's like me to do that. Lastly, the daily goal statement. So what is this? This is kind of like the direct affirmation, kind of. An objective that you state, an objective that you intend to reach. And it's always written in the first person present tense as if you had already reached it. So it's not written in the past. It's not written as if in the future tense, like you haven't achieved it yet. It's in the present tense. You already are that. You are currently have attained it. It's currently in your possession. And again, this is all to build up that self-image. And I do this a lot at the very end after I'm done journaling. I will write down, hey, it is like me to do this. It is like me to be this. Right there in the present tense. Whoa, that's going to wrap it up. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We only have about 1 or 2 more videos on With Winning in Mind. Next, in a couple weeks, we're going to talk about the self-image circle. It's going to be the last section of Lanny's book, and that'll be a good one. We're going to talk about the direct affirmation in there, talk about what I did, what I wrote for my direct affirmation, which actually is, and there's a due date on it. It's actually coming up soon, or an expiration date, I guess you would maybe call it. But if you listen this far, thank you so much. If you have any questions on this book, let me know in the comments section. Please like, please subscribe. And we're going to be still doing the bell curve. That'll come out next week. Well, guys, my name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care, everybody.